Yes.
Cool.
And so,
if you guys want to, when you guys jump in, go ahead and mute yourselves until I kind of get to y'all's introductions.
Sounds good.
But also feel free to, interrupt me. Like, if you think there's a question or something that's really good, feel free to jump in. I don't care.
Sure.
Heckling's okay. Got it.
Yep, totally.
Jump it over.
All right.
Cool.
See you there.
So you go.
Howdy, y'all. I cannot hear most of you, but hopefully you all can hear me. I was just practicing how to appropriately share my screen, and I'm going to do it again, and we'll go ahead and dive into the presentation. So briefly, before we get started, this presentation as a whole is organized by the Megagame Coalition, which is a group of groups throughout North America who meet annually in GenCon in person generally. So because all this COVID stuff's going on, we don't really have the chance to do that, right? But in general, every year our little group has grown in size, and I would say kind of like weird megagame cultural importance. And it really has become this community locus in the North American megagaming scene, which is extremely small. So we'll get to that in a bit, but more than half of the active groups in North America who really put on events, some years make it to GenCon with the Megagame Coalition. And I'm not to say that's everybody, and I'm sure we're leaving people out. But we are a welcoming group, and we love everyone. And if you are a curious gamer or designer, definitely reach out to us. Next year, when in-person GenCon comes rearing back, hopefully we will too. So with that out of the way, I'm going ahead and share my screen. The first part of the talk is going to be just me talking. So you guys have to put up with me for a little bit. And then we have some other guests coming on in a bit, and I will introduce them as they become suddenly more relevant. So the talk as a whole is called the State of Megagames, and it's going to pivot to an overview of a scene of the megagame scene, specifically around North America in general. But it also is kind of just a general presentation of megagames geared towards a first-time audience. So if you are a super veteran megagamer and you've heard all this stuff before, I completely apologize. But I definitely want to talk about what I wish I was told when I first got started. So I've been active in the scene for a little bit. This is my kind of megagaming pedigree. On the left are kind of the logos of the designs that I've personally run and been a primary designer on, and then I've also helped out with a bunch of other games and stuff like that, and Megagames and Megagame live activities. Most recently was I helped out Stefan with his incredibly ambitious Owl League, which was a 2-week-long digital megagame, which we can talk about later. Yes. So I will talk briefly about. I'm also was one of the main organizers for the Megagame Coalition at GenCon last year, and I also was the main organizer for the Megagame presence at Shucks 19. So if you get the chance to come to Shucks next year, I highly recommend it, and definitely come check out the Megagame section. So now part one of what I wish people told me is art is heart, and I mean that. I this is something that somebody told me a while back, and it's really stuck with me because it really explains the incredibly high emotions that I've seen behind a lot of these megagames on the designer side, on the player side. It's really just an incredible experience to be a part of a megagame. And from the designer perspective, the pressure on you is pretty immense. And so I don't want to deter anyone from hosting their own megagame, But I think it's important to kind of encapsulate and acknowledge the fact that like people are really putting their heart out there when they host a mega game or they design a mega game and stuff like that. And I've been incredibly lucky. Even my worst received mega game, still, which was I'll just go ahead and say it, which was the recent draft night got an incredibly polarized response for rightful reasons. I've been incredibly lucky. The community has been, incredibly gracious, and the criticisms and critique of the game were, appropriately phrased and stuff like that. And I really consider myself incredibly lucky to be a part of this community. And so I'm hosting the next draft night on this Sunday, and it's going to be phenomenal, largely because of the critiques that I received the first time I ran it. So, and in addition to all the emotions behind it, also money gets involved sometimes, which complicates things even further. To talk a little bit further about what it feels like to actually organize a mega game. I only have a small sample size of. I've really only talked about this specifically with one other person, and he had a similar experience. But now that I've run multiple original mega game designs, I really feel like this is the average emotional arc of running an original mega game that's yours for the first time. And so, it starts out before the game, where you're rushing and you're a little bit stressed, but overall very excited. And as soon as the game starts, you get like a rush of enthusiasm from the players, and you're answering questions, and things are going great. And at some point during the game, the level of greatness is just going to really fall down, to really crater. And I'm not saying this happens every time, but a lot of times it does happen. And it's incredibly stressful, and it's some of the most stressed I've ever been in my entire life was when I was in charge of a mega game that was actively going wrong. And the more mega games I've run, I've gotten a little bit better at this, for sure. But it's still stressful. And so then it comes to the debrief, and you get to hear how good of a time so many people had, and you feel great, but you can't help but still feel bad the day after. There's also like a post mega game slump that you have to go through as well, where so much of your life and creative energy was around this game, and now that it's finally over, and certain parts went wrong, and things will go wrong, you kind of have to sit with it and figure out, like oh man, like so much went wrong, and over time you kind of look back and you realize exactly how much went right, and that is definitely a great feeling, and that's kind of what keeps you going game to game. So fueling this cycle is admittedly some of the feedback that you'll get from the players, and so this is a kind of a good but average distribution of feedback that you can expect a lot of the time. You'll get roughly like 1/2 to 80%, somewhere in that range, getting 4 and 5 star ratings, having a great time, a couple 3 stars in there. And then you get, and it doesn't matter how good your game is, just due to, misaligned player expectations or a moderator fumble, there will be players who just have an absolutely miserable time. And that feels horrible. And because you can't help but feel responsible for when players do have a bad time. And so I bring this up just so that, first-time designers and organizers will know what to expect. But also, you just have to... Yes, those players did have a bad time, and yes, a lot of their misery could have been avoidable potentially, but you just have to learn to acknowledge it and live with it, and just do better next time. And you can always do better. It's important to note that a lot of these guys' feedback is dependent on, they tried out a mega game and they had expectations, and it turns out mega games just aren't their thing, or at least not that type of mega game. and so that is beyond your control as well. Even if their dislike of the game stemmed from a moderator fumble, a lot of times their ultimate emotions do come from a place of misaligned player expectations, or just that not being their favorite flavor of ice cream. So now on to some lighter topics. So these next section is from the U.S. perspective, which is what are megagames, right? And so this is an important topic for the U.S. audience, because most U.S. mega gamers, I feel like, don't really have any clue, and I certainly didn't, what mega games actually were until I really got pretty deep in the hobby. So we'll come back to this question, but I think it's important to kind of give an overview of the original genres of mega games. These were kind of the old school genres. And so from left to right, these kind of fall along a spectrum of highly mechanical to more freeform and negotiation based. So on the left, you have operational mega games, and I had to have someone explain this to me, but operational refers to military operations, is what it means. So it's a strategic level, which is another thing that someone had to explain to me at some point, which is a high level view of a military conflict where you aren't dealing with individual men or individual units. You're dealing with entire divisions and armies along generally a hex-based map, and frequently there's chips involved. That picture is from a incredibly well-regarded mega game called Not Over by Christmas, which is a cold 1980s Cold War turned hot scenario. And I've heard a lot about it, and unfortunately I've never got a chance to play it, and it just sounds super cool. But anyways, moving on. In the middle, we have like kind of the Watch the Skies mega game, which has taken the U.S. Pretty much by storm. It seems that a lot of people's first mega game designs are Watch the Skies fit into different themes, or just Watch the Skies but with the alien plot lines tweaked in a way that makes it seem like a new game. These games have both mechanical elements and freeform elements. They generally have like a UN with negotiations in it, and there's also kind of a military map, stuff like that. And then the last old school genre is pretty straightforward. These are negotiation simulations. And so this is a picture of Washington Conference, which is a game by the outspoken and well-spoken Dave Boundy. And I was lucky enough to participate in this, and it was very, very interesting experience to be really in the weeds of negotiating 1920s era naval treaties between great powers, and really getting into the details of submarines versus cruisers versus battleships. Very interesting. So those are kind of the original genres, and so keep those in mind when I come back to this. Is what are mega games? And so these are kind of some of the other questions that arrive initially, especially from the US scene, and also from the UK scene. I mean, there's a great semi-joking group online called Megagame Definers, which is a Facebook group. If you want to fall in with the trolls of the mega gaming scene, it's a great place. But because the concept is not very well defined in the U.S., these questions, a lot of them do have answers, right? Like definitive answers, but nobody in the U.S. knows them. So my real point is in the U.S., nobody knows, and only a few people really care. And so there are some practical implications of this, and most of those practical implications are unfortunately the fallout are the UK guys who have to deal with potential brand dilution and stuff like that of this mega gaming label. If everything's a mega game, what is a mega game, and how do you ensure quality between mega games? So from the US perspective, for designers, players are not expecting an actual mega game when they show up to a mega game. They're expecting a Watch the Skies game, essentially. or a Watch the Skies like game. Maybe they're expecting some other strange variant that they've heard about, but it's really just a Watch the Skies esque experience. And that's good and bad. It's good because Watch the Skies is a relatively easy game to put together, but also the player expectations are extremely limited. So the other thing I'd like to point out is first-time Megagame designers definitely look beyond Watch the Skies for design influence. There's so much out there, and there's really a dearth of operational and negotiation simulation megagames in the U.S. scene. So I'll let you guys read that. But for U.S. players, I definitely recommend following specific designers. If you like their original designs, definitely kind of follow them and encourage them specifically to create new designs. And when you come back, if you come back to GenCon a second time, definitely see what the designer of the last year's game that you went to that you really enjoyed. Definitely check out what he's doing this year, type of thing, or she. Excuse me. I was putting myself in the shoes of the designer. Definitely read the description because just so you're aware of the expectations. So just to go over some of the other kind of branching genres and subgenres of megagames that are sprouting like weeds and or have been around in the case of this NSDM style, which I'll get to in a sec. Starting from the top left, there's kind of a trend of just having these like 30-person board game experiences that are kind of mega games in a certain sense, but they really lack the emergent gameplay of some of that players should expect from a mega game. So that's a picture of Aegon's Conquest. I don't mean to call them out specifically, but I think they are emblematic of a broader trend. And I'm not saying that Aegon's Conquest is a bad game or anything. I've personally never played it, but from what I've heard about the game, there really is a complete lack of emergent gameplay. Taking it clockwise, we have a proud subgenre of metagaming in the US called National Security Decision Making, or NSDM. And they've kind of sprouted a couple other games off of their original designs. That is a picture of my game Scythe at Shucks. And that is the president of Polonia, or Poland, and I believe the Kaiser of the Saxony Empire, rock, paper, scissoring it out to determine who wins the duel. And so the NSDM style is a proud U.S. Sprouted original metagaming or like metagaming adjacent scene that completely arose independently from the UK scene. And so in the US, we just like to acknowledge them as kind of our heritage and be like, yeah, we have our metagame styles too, And the important thing about NSDM is the components are very minimal, and essentially everybody has a badge with public information and private information. And from there, most of the actual gameplay is completely freeform. Of course, we also have a number of digital mega games coming about these days as well, for obvious reasons that I don't feel the need to elaborate on. This is a screenshot of the Den of Wolves that happened a couple weeks ago by Kurt LaRue, who did the Den of Wolves game today and is doing the Den of Wolf games tomorrow with his crew, Splintered Realities. And it went very well before, so I imagine it'll go very well again. And the last is that's my buddy Trenton in the plaid shirt, and this is another picture from Shucks. And there are more and more like LARP mega game hybrids where the line between LARPs and mega games are already extremely fuzzy in my mind. And so when you really design mega games for kind of a LARP player empowerment experience with kind of loose consequences on the actual of the entire of player choices and stuff like that, they're incredibly fun, but it's also reaching the point of kind of it's definitely in subgenre territory, if not a different genre altogether. So on to part 3, the lay of the land. So the U.S. community is extremely small. These are the number of groups involved. This is actually an estimate. I don't know the exact numbers of people who went to GenCon throughout the years. And I believe we started in 2016. We might have started in 2015 now that I think about it. I can't remember. And as you can see, the height of our power was going to be this year when we were going to bring a whole 10 groups together from around the country. Just so, so we're small. We're really small. There's number and there's practical implications for that too. Is if you want to get in touch with any other person in the active broader community, you can reach out to any other sub individual in the broader active community, and they might know each other or they might know how to get in touch with each other. And we're pretty social. A lot of the groups that don't make it to Gen Con, they tend to be off doing their own things. But the people who are on the Megagame Coalition, we definitely keep in touch, and we keep in touch over each other's design and stuff like that. So important question for first-time designers is I would like to ask, this is a little pop trivia game, is where is the Megagame? And like where is the Megagame asset? So is it in the rules? Is it in the player base? Do they have the Megagame? Do the moderators, do they coach the Megagame? Is it like a really collective situation? And this is an trick question. It's one of these answers. And I'll go ahead and I won't stall any further and say it's in the designer's head. That's where the Megagame is. And this is an important thing to realize. A lot of rules are not written down well enough to really be transferable between groups. If you wanted to run someone else's Megagame, the chances of that being possible are actually quite slim, unfortunately. Too much of the design itself is stuck inside the brain of the designer. They know the balance of the economy. They know like what to do if X or Y things happen that's not elaborated on in the rules. Oftentimes the rules just have complete gaps in them, right? Because these are meant to be one-time experiences for hobbyists originally. The rules are getting better. You know, people are really starting to take them seriously. But until that happens, just know that it's not, you most likely won't. At the very least, you'll have to talk to the other designers in a one-on-one setting multiple times in order to run their game. So one thing you can do to broaden your horizon is to come to Gen Con, which is a great way to just expand your Megagame horizon and experience a bunch of stuff. It's definitely the best way to experience new Megagame mechanics and see what worked well, what didn't work well. It's been invaluable for me seeing what people have come up with and what works well and what hadn't worked well. And I would very strongly encourage those interested in Megagame design and organizing, and as well as players, because you know it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. It is completely exhausting, and you do give up a lot of the rest of Gen Con. But if you've been to Gen Con before and you've seen it all, like I just come and volunteer and play, or maybe reach out to us beforehand and we can co-organize your event with you. So to just briefly cover the lay of the land, these are a spectrum of the groups that are active in the U.S. And so I will post this this slideshow on the you can take a screenshot, or I will also post a slideshow on the Discord, I imagine. I think that'd be the best place for it. And you can check out the slide on your own. Just to go through some of the more active groups, Splintered Realities at the top left are the crew who's doing the Den of Wolves right now for Gen Con, which is great. Magic Coffee House is Stefan's group, and he just did Owl League recently. Ottawa Megagames is pretty active. Shout out to our Canadian brothers, but they, I believe they don't have anything in the works currently due to COVID. Michigan Megagames is active, and so is the National Security Decision Making Games. They're a group of old timers who are active. West Coast Megagames is active in the coalition. And I guess the last shout out I will give to Megagame Texas and also PAX Sims, who is kind of they're an academic journal who publish a lot on simulations and the art and science behind Megagames. Oh, and of course, the Adventure Society is also running a bunch of mini Megagame training missions. These are kind of half playtesting and half Megagame experiences throughout GenCon as well, so I recommend checking them out. In terms of the lay of the land outside the U.S., I have a slide for that too, but I don't think I will go into it as deeply. One is because I wouldn't be able to do it justice, and two is we have some UK guys here, and if they want to give a shout out to any specific groups, they can. Although I wouldn't pressure them to do so because I feel like the risk of forgetting a group is just too high. The social cost of forgetting a group is too high.
What I will say is that all of those groups are really good, and a bit of a plug ahead is the Megagame Assembly up in the top right there does a worldwide calendar and blogs and podcasts. So if you're looking for a resource to kind of have a look at everything going on globally, I would point people in those directions. But for everyone over in the States or not in the UK, any one of these groups are great to pop along to a game to if you get the chance.
Yes, that was Matt Bainbridge from the Megagame Assembly, and he will be coming on to talk a little bit more later. So I am going to bring on Scott. Scott, are you there?
I found my unmute button.
Yes. So Scott, I thought we would come on and talk about. You've been a player and a moderator. I thought we would just talk briefly about some of your experience. Oh, excuse me, my monitor bugged out there. Are you ready, Scott?
I am absolutely ready.
Okay, so I know both you and your sister came to Shucks last year, and I know for an absolute fact that your sister actually had a pretty good time at my game Scythe, or Sickle, I should say.
Yes, very relieving to me.
Yes, yeah. Did you brief her going into the game? Like, what did you think? Like, was there something that you told her that you think helped her have a good time or anything like that?
It was a bit because I've gotten her into D&D, so she's into role playing and being able to get in character. And I was going through the process of trying to explain the whole, like, she's listened to me rant about mega games enough times that she's familiar with the concept. And I was able to, I guess, dupe her into playing one with me. Originally, she was going on this trip just to enable me to fly out to go play mega games for 3 days straight.
What a sister.
Yeah, I know, she's great. But I think the biggest thing that like convinced her to like join in was just going into the world, and then she really latched on to the faction that she ended up playing, and she's like, well, what can I do to make out a cool outfit and get into character about it?
Yeah, she was great. Yeah, she was playing with the designer of the Rise of Fenris expansion, Ryan Lopez, which is kind of a neat little experience as well. Who also had a great time.
The biggest thing I told her when going into this is just, you are not in control. You will never be in control, and you only have like a small sliver of an idea of what's going on. So just find something that you care about that you can actually control and work on that. And for her, after the game, she was telling me that she became really focused on trying to put out these fires that were starting, where people were starting wars. So anytime she saw two factions really starting to get into conflict with each other, she'd make it her mission to go over there and try and find a diplomatic solution, which I'm very happy that she found some sort of path.
Yeah, which fit her character as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have any other advice for like first time, second time, third time mega game players?
I find the amount of times I've gotten to a game and I just have like no control over what's going on, and that's part of the fun of it. The biggest advice I can give to anybody, whether it's your first time or your third time, whatever, is just come up with your own personal goals, even if they are not mechanically in place. For example, if you're going to play like a Game of Thrones themed game, saying like, I'm going to be the king at the end. Well, yeah, but it's probably unlikely to happen. So
Yeah.
will you be disappointed if that doesn't happen? For me, if I was doing that, I'd be focused on like, well, maybe I can help make sure it's not someone who's completely off their rocker on the throne, or maybe I just don't care about that. Maybe I'm just going to carve out my own territory and declare our independence, and we'll see how that goes.
Wise words. Wise words. Scott, I would love to keep talking, but I think we have to keep going for time reasons. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Mm-hmm. All right, my next guest is the wonderful John Cleveland from West Coast Megagames.
Hey, Peter.
Yes. All right. So, John, I want to talk to you about, and I know we've talked about this. I think we've actually talked about this multiple times, but I want to talk to you about the freeform section of Sengoku. Do you want to describe it, or should I?
Go for it. Let's hear your thoughts, and maybe I'll bounce off of that.
Yes. So one of your early games that you did with West Coast Megagames was Sengoku, which was this Imperial era Japan. What do you call it? Edo era?
No, it's the Sengoku era. It's adapted off of
Sengoku
Jim Wallman's Sengoku, which was run, I think, 5 times before we ran it in 2014.
Yes. And one of the parts of this game was the Emperor's Court. And so the Emperor's Court would have, an emperor, and people would send their representatives there. And there was also a Bakufu, which were kind of the imperial bureaucracy, who had power on paper, but no real power. And that was essentially it. That was the entire freeform section. And I kept, before I experienced this game itself, because I helped you moderate it at GenCon when you guys came, I kept asking you, like, is that it? Is that all the mechanics for the section? Like, is there nothing more? Is there nothing mechanical? Like, is there nothing? And the answer is pretty much no. I mean, there's a little bit of an honor system that kind of goes on in the game, but it's all bent on players taking it like seriously, and taking the freeform section seriously, and it worked. It's a phenomenal section. It might be my favorite part of the game. It's just so cool, and it blew my mind to see all these players just interacting with each other completely without game mechanics.
So for me, especially, I don't consider myself a designer. I consider myself a redesigner because I've mostly taken other people's designs, and when I have an original idea, I'm just like, throw that out. Let's redesign this one first. So when I was looking at Jim's rules, what struck me was he did a really great job of doing a simulation, kind of that same Watch the Skies, not really operational, that broad mega game simulation of the thing. But what was missing for me was the historical court. I assume because, as far as I can tell, he's designing for 30 to 40 players. And at the time, I was designing for 80 players or so. And these bigger simulated or narrative structures in mega games require a large mega game population. You can't do them with 30 people because it's taking 8 to 10 people out of the game to go do this other sub game, right?
Yep.
But for me at WCM, focusing on creating a world and a narrative that draws people in enough that they're willing to live into that, and the mechanics really become their interactions within that solid game world, that is, for me, what we should be shooting for, and is that cross between LARP, right, and mechanics. But it still needs to be grounded by the mechanics of the rest of the game. Arguing in a council, for example, doesn't matter unless there is a foundation of reality that you guys are arguing over.
Interesting. Yeah, I was trying to think about how, because the council games are actually quite hit and miss for those who haven't experienced mega games before. They can go really poorly. So whatever it does, and I'm incredibly thankful. And it's a bit hard to tease out what council games are better than other council games. So that's quite insightful, John.
I think that if you don't have a foundational reality, whether it's brought by the moderators, by the mechanics, by the outside game itself, then councils devolve into arguments between individuals who stop even being in their roles, as opposed to arguments based on the current lay of the land and what they're trying to do. And if you really design the simulation to give them incentive to switch positions, then you have a dynamic console that doesn't just end up in gridlock. And I think that at least our current designs of Sengoku and Watch the Skies allow that. And I've seen it in a lot of other games. And like Washington Conference gives a lot of open decision-making changes throughout the course of the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep, exactly. Yeah. So I guess, I feel like it would be remiss to not talk a little bit about that beautiful globe behind you. You can see it in the picture just behind John and the fellow.
Here, I'll throw another picture up into general.
Yes.
So first time, this is primarily for first time designers, redesigners, runners, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's our theme. My suggestion, and this is totally not the approach WCM went in. My suggestion is when you sit down to do a mega game, whether it's redesigning your own game, make sure that your materials look good, but absolutely do not bite off a challenge as far as making something that looks really cool or is really dynamic until you have a rule set that you are ready to expand that into. We have done a great job designing so that we weren't trapped by that map. But at the same time, so on top of venue fees, on top of everything else, if I wanted to do a redesign on that map today, I'd be looking at like $800 to $1,000 in the hole just to make sure it was all good. Wow. I could deploy it in its current condition.
Yep.
But, a single stat change and all of my tokens, which are magnetic, have to change. And so absolutely do not go down that path until you are ready on design. And we in the community don't do enough testing, right? Ultimately, our games are our beta and or live test, even if you do beta testing. So it's really cool to do that, but you will, even if you think you have Megagames on lock, there are so many things that you will not be able to account for that designing a well-made player interface that is on production scale is not the thing you should do until you're satisfied with that design, which you never will be. So that's my shout out to high quality materials. Definitely design them loose if you can.
Wow, wise words. All right, well, I'm going to bring John back for the question section, but briefly, I'm going to move on to our last two guests, who are all the way joining us from the UK. So hello, Mies. Hello, Matt.
Hello.
Hi.
And so you guys are two wonderful people, and uniquely, you guys were both actually at last year's GenCon all the way from the UK. Was there any, what's like, do you have any highlights or observations from last year's GenCon that you just want to give a quick shout out to?
I'll let Nis go first.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't want to put you on the spot. I guess I just did.
I think for me, it was my first time at GenCon, and I had a brilliant time. And I think the highlight for me is still sitting at the front desk watching while the first Den of Wolves game ran, and just how sweet and cooperative everyone was being until the kind of realization dawned that actually maybe not everyone was friends.
Yeah, I believe they were broadcasting
wonderful.
The coordinates right over the news so everyone could hear.
Yeah.
In a hidden trader mechanic game. So
it was just a wonderful thing to watch unfold as someone who previously played the game and knew exactly what was coming.
Matt?
Yeah, it was my first GenCon as well, and I spent most of it closed away in Megagames. I think I did 5.5 over the 2 days, the Friday and the Saturday, and I loved it. I remember turning up on the Thursday evening, and Peter, you were there to kind of greet us, and he was like, "Do you want to come play part of this NSDM game?" And I almost walked away because, flight, drive, and all that. And then I immediately changed my mind and ran back up stairs, and that was my first exposure to NSDM, which is a very different type of gaming than what we do over here. But yeah, it was a great experience.
Yes, yeah. Those guys, yeah, they're great. They really do. It's all their own what they do, which is great. Yeah. So, even in this digital age, where everyone across the globe is constantly Zoom meeting each other, it is kind of difficult to keep track of what's going across in the UK. Are there any projects that you guys are kind of excited about, or that you've heard of?
After you, Matt.
Oh, after me, okay. So yes, there's kind of number going on. There's lots of people considering online games. There's some big things being planned for a couple of large scale games, so 150 player plus games for next year and the year after.
Wow, are these digital or in person?
In person, so I'm not going to say
Ooh.
what they are right yet because they're still being cooked up. But yeah, there are kind of plans for some larger scale games, which will be really cool. So if
Oh
anyone
man,
can get over to the UK in 21 and 22, then I highly recommend it.
you're killing me. Oh God, I wanna know, Matt.
All in the
Keep your
fullness of
secrets. It's
time.
fine.
All in the fullness of time.
Mm. Lisa, I got some more specific questions for you if you're ready.
Sure. Yeah.
So you are part of a group of female and non-binary mega game enthusiasts, and you guys have your own Discord server. Would you want to? Why don't you talk about that a little bit? Talk about kind of what the reason for forming the group is, and such.
That's a very large topic.
It is.
Yeah, we have a group. It's mainly, I think, just to have a space to talk about mega games that is not male dominated, which the majority, unfortunately, at this point are. So it was really, I think, just to have a space where we could discuss mega gaming and kind of everything that anyone would discuss about mega gaming, really.
So if someone wanted to join this group, could they reach out to you?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, if you identify as non-male, please message me. And if you want to join us on Discord, we have a WhatsApp group as well. So yeah, we can definitely hook you up and get you involved.
And so, do you have any advice for female non-binary gamers who are looking to get into the hobby?
I think don't be too nervous to get stuck in, because I think it can be quite intimidating walking into a room that is kind of the majority male. Well, my first mega game was Watch the Skies 3 in 2015, which was a kind of 300 player-ish game. And I was the only woman on a team of 6 or 7, I think. And most of whom I hadn't met before. And the room was obviously primarily male, and it can be quite intimidating walking into that environment as someone who isn't male. But if you just get stuck in and start negotiating with people and then trying to get stuff out of them and get them to do what you want and all of that wonderful conniving, scheming mega game goodness, the yeah, it becomes a lot easier, a lot faster, I think.
Good. So I'll switch back to Matt. Matt, why don't you talk about? I guess you mentioned the Mega Game Assembly briefly earlier. Do you want to elaborate any further on the Mega Game Assembly and maybe what you guys are up to these days with COVID?
Yeah, sure, and I'll pop a link in the general channel as well for people to pop along if they'd like to. So, yeah, Mega Assembly basically is led by me, a guy called Harris, and a guy called Chris, or UK Mega Gamers. Because we love mega gaming, essentially. So on there, you can find a calendar for everything that goes on across the world, including online mega games. We've just added that to the calendar at the moment. There is a little bit of a section on what is a mega game as well, which is always a slightly contentious topic, as Pete was talking about earlier. There's some free mega games on there that are available. Other mega game resources like glossary, component making guides, a guide to groups kind of around the world as well, blogs, podcasts, other things. We regularly do things on the Facebook page as well, and it really is all about trying to draw everyone in from across the world who plays Megagames, because there are probably not as many people who play Mega Games as we'd love to. Probably a global population of Mega Games is probably under 3,000, but we'd love to kind of grow that. And so that's kind of what we aim to do. So if you'd like to be on a blog or a podcast, or with me under Mr. Mega Game, which I'll shamelessly self-promote and pop in there as well, I tend to do interviews over on Twitch with people. Been a little bit quiet actually because I've moved house during COVID, but I tend to get back to those quite soon. But yeah, so more of all of that, basically, helping getting Mega Games out across the world to a wider audience.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I really dig what you guys are doing. None of the three of you are designers inherently, right? You guys are just enthusiasts and players.
I am designing a game, and I'm involved in another one, as is Chris. But no, none of us have started off as designers. We
Ooh, do you
came
want to
into
hype your game at all, or?
I am doing a game which is loosely titled "To the Stars of Gods and Men," which is riffing off Stargate quite heavily. So people
Awesome.
will play gods and golems, their servants, and humans in this big confusing world connected together by things that are totally not Stargate for legally distinct reasons. So that's my one that I'm talking about. The other one is the big one, which people will hear about more in the fullness of time. But yeah, we're mostly enthusiasts. I think I've been to about 75 games in the last 5 years.
Woo!
Yeah, the GenCon year I did. I think I was one or two short of 30, which was my aim. So I think I did 28, 29. So I missed the 30, and this year has spoilt my chance to get up to that number.
Yeah, well, that's great. Okay, well, so we are coming up on the 45-minute mark, so I think we will just bring John back on, and we will shift to a little bit of a question and answer section.
Excitement.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I've been staring at my notes most of the time, so I'm not aware of if there are any questions going on.
There are lots of questions in the questions for the panel section.
Yes. Let's see here. Scrolling down.
How do you want to do this, Pete? Do you want to moderate and throw questions out, and we'll all just kind of tag ourselves onto the end of them?
Yeah, let's well, I did not plan for this. We'll just scroll down the list. We'll take turns. If you guys happen to find a question that pops out to you.
Peter, there's our favorite question that somebody's asked, of course, and I think they meant it in jest, but it's always fun to hear, what is a mega game?
A mega game? Yes, a mega game is an interactive event of 40 plus people, usually going 48 hours, that incorporate board game and role playing elements. Is what I usually say.
Excellent.
And so that's as specific as I can get.
That's great.
You go as far as high as 40 because a lot of them run for 20.
Yeah, I don't know, man. If you get below 30, that's, I don't know.
Yeah, my rule is actually 35, but I've found that I'm in the majority wanting larger groups, or in the minority wanting larger groups.
I would kind of say
that
getting into the minutiae of talking about numbers is, to me, a bit of a distraction. You could theoretically run a mega game for 15, 20 people. The real thing is your game something that isn't just a board game or a kind of a parlor LARP type of thing? So for me, it is about kind of bringing the elements of what a mega game together is, and that is having some mechanics you interact with, having a negotiation element, kind of having roles. There's a question later down where someone asked about, do they have to be hierarchical? Traditionally, yes, though I think people are playing around more with not just having hierarchical teams or hierarchies that emerge rather than a set, which is also really exciting. But yeah, just if anyone is going to try and tell you that you're not running a mega game because it doesn't have enough people, ignore them. You can ignore me if you want, but just crack on, run your game, and have fun. Let's not
Yep.
spend too much time worrying about what they actually are.
Actually, good to build on this. Patrick out of Sydney asked if you had a rule of thumb for megagame complexity, so you might be able to build onto what you're talking about there as well. So, do megagames need to be complex in order to be megagames?
To continue on for me, no, I don't think so. I think you can have games that are quite simple. I think some of the games GenCon last year kind of proved that you can have very freeform experiences. And if you look at, say, Trope High, done by Becky Ladley, who goes under Becky Blogs, the rules for the players were very simple. Now, there were some more complexity for people behind the scenes, adding scores up, but player fronting is very simple. The same for Washington Conference as well. Player fronting, very simple.
I'm inclined to agree. Even sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to add that I think you can have a very kind of straightforward, simple game, and players will complicate it. So you don't necessarily need to come up with something very complicated, because players will complicate it by themselves anyway, in my experience.
Okay,
Yeah,
let's if you don't mind, I'm going to shift us off the topic of defining mega games and stuff like that. And we will talk. I'm gonna ask some questions to you guys that have the most number of likes on them, the most number of thumbs up. So this is from Kevin from Ottawa. What's one thing that would make written MG rules easier to understand? So I will definitely say get someone else to proofread them, and that I think is a great rule. Do you guys have any other thoughts?
If no one's going to jump in, I will. I would say, in terms of making written rules easier to understand, is really going through, making sure you have examples for them where possible. If you can do an explainer video, they are great for people to look at. You've also just kind of got to understand that mega games have the same weakness that for mechanics that any roleplay or board game does as well. People won't really learn those rules until they interact with them. So beginner turns, explainer turns, where you take 10-15 minutes at the beginning of the day to tell people how they work, they're super important. There's something that started coming in UK scene 2-3 years ago, and they're a blessing. Don't expect people to learn all the rules from just reading a manual, because you wouldn't expect them to do it for a board game or a roleplay game. So you need to kind of take them through it and set up a point where they can relate to them. So either the videos or the explainer turns.
Yeah, expecting them to know the rules after reading the manual is like expecting someone to ace a test after reading, like, you know, a 50-page textbook once. You know, it's designers' expectations on players, I think, are a bit too high sometimes.
I think we also need to really take something from kind of the video game industry on this and scale our mechanics so that they grow over the course of the game, instead of turn one, you're interacting with all the mechanics. And I think you can really do that with theme fairly strongly, where you scale up whatever the nature of the crisis is, or the issue, the invasion, what have you. And I think a lot of designs have started doing that with those beginner turns.
Great. I think we'll move on to next question. So there is a question here about like any thoughts on finding venues. You know, generally the venue cost is quite high. I would recommend two things, which is one is to look into universities, and the other is to look into churches or other religious institutions. Are both generally rather cheap, especially if you get the cooperation of someone who works at the university. Does anyone have any other thoughts on that?
That's been our finding over here on the West Coast. The issue being finding collaboration. The more you look like a commercial group, the harder that collaboration is going to be, which is the issue West Coast Megagames had. We looked commercial fairly early on, so finding those collaborations was hard. But avoiding commercial venues is pretty much a must.
Yeah, it's just I'm still kind of amazed about some of the venues that people in the UK have found, and just the degree of cooperation is very, very impressive. So I'm going to field a question to Nice here.
Um, where do you see the Megagame scene in 2030?
I think, I mean, I definitely think that there's a market for online metagaming, and I think that's been proven kind of over the last few months. Whether that will continue, after our whole global situation calms down, remains to be seen. But I think there's definitely a market for it. I think it makes it more accessible for people who may not otherwise be able to attend games. It gets rid of kind of distance and cost factors, and also kind of physical accessibility. And I think that that's a great thing. As far as in-person mega games, I would love to see kind of higher production value games. Yeah.
Cool, very cool. So Matt and Nice, would you like to elaborate on potentially some of the differences that you've seen between UK and US schools of mega
Sure. I mean, there's actually a remarkable amount of similarities. To be honest, mega games are big, confusing events, and they breed a certain type of play. Um, a little bit more about victory conditions, I think. I see in the American scene a bit more kind of about winning a game, though not to a huge amount, but it's there a bit more. To be honest, it's probably the biggest one I would kind of pull out.
Do you think that's just because there's like new players and designers? Do you think they just kind of haven't played in games without objective like victory conditions?
Um, there's definitely a point where you could say it could be from basically you're coming to it very fresh. A lot of people haven't played games from the European scene, and so when you come over from board games, victory conditions are much more of a thing. But to be honest, it could just be a bit more of a cultural thing where you're used to victory conditions more in games. There's a lot of Euro board games over here, obviously, so it's not a bad thing. It's just slightly different.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I definitely think the thing that I noticed most was the kind of inclination to look for a victory condition to stand up at the end and say these people did the best. That's very different than the scene in the UK. The other thing I noticed was lunch breaks, which have not been a thing in the UK, and was very startling the first game I played at GenCon, and suddenly people started wandering off, and I was like, "Where is everyone going?" And they're like, it's lunchtime.
Yeah, I will mention one observation that I've had as well. The lunch thing is very funny, by the way. Is the U.S. A lot of U.S. players tend to treat the media like Fox News, whereas the UK, I believe, from my experience, seems to treat the news media a bit more seriously. And so that has shown itself in a variety of situations. But I always think it's funny because I've talked to UK organizers and designers who are just kind of shocked at the degree to which media players have stooped to. So
that's a really interesting difference.
Yes. Here's a question that I think we can answer pretty quickly. It's from Zuberi. If these games are non-transferable, how would a person go about even getting into mega games if there are none nearby? Do you just have to design your own? And I think there are two options for first-time organizers that you can actually are transferable, and those are Den of Wolves and, of course, Watch the Skies. I personally would recommend Den of Wolves, but it's just a matter of taste and what you think would sell. So Den of Wolves is the new hotness by John Meinzen. And you can buy his design and the right to run the game at his website, and I'll post it in the chat later.
Yeah,
I think alongside that, there's probably an element of a game is transferable if you are willing to get to know the material really, really well and feel confident in altering it as the game progresses. I don't know that I 100% agree with the statement that games aren't transferable, although I see where you're coming from with it.
So a lot of that comes from the fact that most designers will just not offer, like, I've asked plenty of designers and they just say no when
oh yeah, well that's
when you ask them, and there are other reasons as well, besides the fact that I think the design is mostly in the head, but it's certainly not true that all mega game designs are non-transferable.
Yeah, I would kind of jump on there and I suppose basically try and implore people who are designing, if you're interested in selling your game, to be aware of what it will take to get that game sold and get that game run, because there are great games that are designed all the time, and that is, as Pete said, you need to be able to give the person who's going to be running this an idea of what the foundations that you're doing are. Now, if you're not interested in doing that, obviously that's fine, but I would very much kind of try and get designers to get their games sold or put them out there for free to be run by other people, because we're in a quite small community with Megagames, and so getting games out there and differentiators, and so people can run new games, is a massively important thing. So if you can put together a document that will help someone else run it, you get your name out there as a designer, you get your game being run by other people, and also fundamentally you're helping other groups bring more people into the hobby as well. And even if that is just you jumping onto an hour call with the designer, or just recording yourself talking at camera as you go through your rule book, going, oh right, in the economy, this is what I mean when I say this. I think that would be a great help to everyone in the community, if you've got the time to do it. I understand if people don't.
Good advice. Good advice.
That's what we've seen with the games that have spread, be it Den of Wolves, Watch the Skies, or several of the other games, is they had enough documentation for both designers, redesigners, or game groups that didn't have a designer to jump on them. And I think if we have that model going forward, you'll see a lot more of these designs go out and be played and then be iterated upon.
Okay, well, we are over time, so I reckon we will wrap up here. Any closing thoughts, guys? Then
yeah, I suppose I would say just kind of crack on and get to as many games as you can. I will hang out in the MGC meetings group after this, if everyone can see that, or if there's a chit chat channel as well, isn't there, for
yes,
the MGC community? Because it would be awesome to talk to people. I will answer any questions if anyone fancies that, but it'd be nice to just hang out as well.
yes, I will close by saying come to GenCon, join the Megagame Coalition. We really do have a lot of fun. So thank you very much, John, Nice, Matt. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you guys in the Chit Chat channel.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
I guess you're from the UK. I was going to ask, do you know if the Washington Naval Conference is going to be run in the US anytime soon? But
so I actually believe that rule set is up for free.
Yeah, read the rules.
Yes, you would
I
unfortunately
when I read it, yeah.
It is abstruse as hell. Like, it's just like every player is a historical character who gets 50 pages of information on which kind of US Treasury Secretary they're playing, and then
it was great.
what's going on after that. And it's funny in a way, but in another way, if you don't do your research, you are shit out of luck.
Yeah.
I suppose I probably wouldn't be that harsh on it. I think there's quite a lot
Oh, I
you can
like
do
it.
with
It's just
yeah. There's quite a lot you can do with that game because, to be honest, while you are playing historical characters, it is still more about the role you're playing. If you're playing the finance guy, if you're playing the diplomat or other things, that it's more about that than who you actually are. I played it a couple of times, and my personal historical role in both of those times didn't really pay a big impact upon what I was doing in a day. But I've got the link to the Megagame, sorry, the Washington Conference docs, which I'll pop in the general channel just in case anyone is interested about it. Which is done by Dave Boundy, who's a good designer. Hello, everyone. There's quite a lot of people in here now.
The thing I'd say about Washington Conference is that you really have to kind of embody what white rich people in the 1920s thought, which is quite difficult when you're basically divvying up China. And I'm not sure enough of that is discussed kind of out of context. It's something to think about anyway.
Yeah, it's definitely a game that deals with a certain point in history, and you should probably come with a warning label for that. It very much is about the great powers of the time dividing up China and legation cities, as well as talking about the actual Washington Naval Conference itself. So that's just something people need to be aware of going into that game.
Found that like much stronger themes tend to resonate, at least over here in the U.S. It's good stuff. Good stuff, though. Well, no, not stronger themes. I'm sorry, that's not the right phrase. Things you're more likely to find on television.
Sure. So you kind of mean the more towards the fantasy style or fantasy sci-fi style genres?
Sort of. One of our best-selling games was actually a murder mystery. Hearsay worked out really well, and of course, Watch the Skies immediately grabs everyone's attention because aliens.
Yeah. One of the questions up in the chat was have any games. I'm trying to find it now because I have any metaphorical mega games being run, and Watch the Skies is actually an example of that. Because the aliens in Vanilla Watch the Sky, they're essentially meant to teach you that humans are going to be aggressive towards these aliens, but the aliens basically invariably have peaceful purposes. Various designers do change that, but Watch the Skies itself is a good example for basically metaphors woven into games.
Yeah, I'd say so.
One of the things I'd say about the UK scene in particular is that there's a lot of, it predates the shut up and sit down video that probably most of us kind of got into in the first instance. So there's quite a lot of old grognards who have a very different idea of what games should be. And that's why a lot of their themes can be less kind of made for TV and more like we're doing the Sixth Crusade or we're doing like the Mexican War of Independence or something like that. And those aren't bad themes. It's just like they kind of investigate difficult subjects in a way that I think the kind of newer wave of mega games don't.
No, I'd absolutely agree with that. Because it's really hard. One of the things that I've always tried to position myself as is to be trying to on-road people into the hobby as much as humanly possible. And it is a much easier sell to be like, anyways, there's this big political thing that's happening. Everybody's arguing with everyone else, and then aliens show up. Much easier to get into that than very specific historical contexts, which definitely have their place.
Those games.
think
Go ahead.
I was going to say, since I'm your northern neighbor, I think the issue, just like they were speaking to, is that most of our players are coming into the hobby having seen Shut Up and Sit Down. So it is their context. It's what they're looking for.
Yeah.
The only reason why Sengoku even flew is because at the time there wasn't a Watch the Skies alternative. So I was offering the only mega game that was available on the West Coast. And it is formatted enough like Watch the Skies that players, regardless of them being into the historical context, because that's completely a historical context game, we're able to get into it. But subsequently, as more and more mega games have been offered, our American audience is looking for Watch the Skies. It's not even about mega games. They're looking for what
That
they
one
saw
specifically,
on the
yeah.
video. And once they're into the hobby, then they can branch out and say, well, would I want that theme? Am I into historical? And I think Scott can speak to this, because Scott's kind of branched out all over the place now. But I would say 50% of our players go, got my Watch the Skies experience in. Do I even want to play another mega game? That was fun. That was intense. But am I ready to delve deeper in? And I think we lose probably about 50% of the players each time, not even because they had a bad time.
I've discovered this too, is that people can have like an absolutely awesome, amazing time, leave 5-star reviews, and be super happy about the whole thing, and then you never see them again. Even if you're running different games sometimes.
There's definitely... Sorry, who was I cutting off there?
Carry on.
Sure. I said there's definitely a quality to mega games where people can think about them as an event rather than a hobby, and that's for a mix of things. One is the time commitment to them. The second is that they change radically each time. Basically, there's a kind of quality component there. So there's some kind of community management that needs to be baked in, I think, and what I haven't started community, I've observed quite a lot of them in the UK. And the ones that do it quite well are the ones that are reaching out. So I'll hold up True North Megagames and Horizon Megagames for this, who have run games specifically through their calendar to keep bringing new people in. Because it's a niche hobby, right? You're at the confluence of people who like UN debates, board gaming, LARPs, hardcore operational games. You're at the confluence of all of these things. So you need to keep on drawing in new players. And for that, you need to make sure that basically at least once or twice a year, you're running a Watch the Skies style game, or not a Shut Up Sit Down style game, but a Den Wall style game to kind of draw people into what you're doing.
Yeah, just to bounce off
to that. Oh, go on.
Oh no, you go ahead. You were waiting.
I was just going to say, like the perception that people come to Watch the Skies and never come back is probably only half of the truth. I think for some of the longer running groups in the UK, what we've seen is there are folks who'll turn up to a Watch the Skies and then come back in 2 years' time, and it turns out it's just their appetite for mega games is once every 2 years. But because some of the UK groups have been running longer, I guess we see that data more easily. And they're people who've totally been hooked. They just, whatever else is going on in their life, their other commitments, they're only ever going to get to one every 2 years. They're going to be careful about which one it is, but they want to come back.
Yeah, just to point on the 5-star reviews not leading to return customers. It is worth noting that a lot of time these reviews are gathered is at the end of the game when people have their adrenaline pumping, they're on an emotional high. And actually, one of the biggest hurdles to get into the hobby as a whole is the low that you experience, like the day after, where your voice is sore, you can't get out of bed, etc., etc. So it's possible that experience turns them off. It's also you just lose people, don't you? Last thing I wanted to say was that I was surprised in a talk about the state of mega games that Shut Up Sit Down didn't come up in the core talk, because that's such a huge part of how we've all found the hobby. And what they choose to do with mega game coverage in the next few years is going to have a big part, I think, on whether the hobby can grow or not.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
Is your experience that they are actively interested? Because my experience talking to them in 2014, 2016, and 2018 separately is that while they appreciate what they've done for the hobby, they wanted nothing to do with its perpetuation. From direct conversations with them at cons. So my takeaway has always been that we as a international group now that have been more or less brought together because of them need to look at self-direction and figuring out what we can do to drive what they did in the 2 separate Watch the Skies videos. Because it wasn't just their platform. They did something fundamentally different in those videos that we more or less have only captured 1 or 2 more times since then.
I think they're a little more open to that. Like the Shucks, they always have a big mega game showing, and last year's Shucks, like, I mean, we had several mega games, and they were very opening. Like, they were very excited to have us, and they really wanted mega games to be a big part of that expo.
Yeah,
talk a little more.
Yeah, their opinion of like mega games is complicated. I'm fortunate enough to have worked with them on a few different board game related projects. That's the industry that I do as a day job. And I had the opportunity to talk to them a bunch about mega games, and their feeling is complicated. Basically, from what I could get, they are a bit reluctant that they've become the de facto spokesman for mega gaming in terms of like its well, not mainstream coverage, but well, I guess that is the term it is. So they're a bit reluctant that they've. Yeah, exactly. They're a bit reluctant that they've had that thrust upon them. And there was a reaction to that. And they were also they were hoping for more innovation in the mega game scene than they'd seen. They wanted a push away from like traditional historical map fighting games to maybe some different territory, which is why they covered. I don't remember the name. It's the astronaut game. Somebody can jump in.
Bring them home is what you're thinking of.
Yeah, Bring Them Home. It's why they covered that, because they thought it was different.
Yeah, I mean, I had the opportunity to talk to Quinns after he came to one of the last Washington conference game, and it's kind of very much that one of the main things Quinns was saying basically was until there was new stuff to cover, a lot of the games are in the same vein, and that's kind of not what they do, right? They cover new things mostly. I think it's also worth saying being in a position to see stats on a couple of different websites and pages whenever Shut Up and Sit Down mention a mega game, they skyrocket up. They really do. As soon as they mention a mega game, you get hits to a whole host of other groups, even my Mr. Mega Game page. So they still have a profound influence. So if people are doing something new, I think that they don't think exists in the genre at the moment, that's the time to bring them in. But then just kind of watching them like hawks for whenever they happen to post something about mega games, taking advantage of the sudden uptick in traffic that you're going to get.
I think on the subject of other directions you can take these sorts of things, it's interesting. My background is actually in escape room. I was the first escape rooms in San Diego opened about 6 years ago, and I transitioned to mega games among other games because they're fun. And I actually had a lot of success with transferring my audience from escape rooms to mega games, provided that those mega games were about murder mystery or other sorts of like that kind of theme set, which I found to be helpful. Also, large collaborative escape room being a very useful thing. I think that might be an interesting route to look at.
Yeah, I think there's scope for more collaborative games in general. Like Den of Wolves is defined, I think, by being more collaborative than a lot of games, and it's one of the most successful games that have been designed in recent times. I think people are happier to collaborate, particularly new players on average are happier to collaborate with others than maybe the rest of the mega-gaming community.
And to bring it back briefly, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No.
It's interesting to hear you say that you think the future of the hobby is dependent on their coverage, but it appears from the US end that we're more popular than we've ever been, and we will likely continue to become more popular in the future.
As soon as we can all get back together again, yes.
Yeah. So it's just a different thing in the U.S., I guess.
I think that's entirely fair. And you guys have been, I mean, GenCon in particular has been a massive booster, right? Well,
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
an outsider's perspective, but it seems like, you know, the fact that GenCon exists and is sort of, even if it can be a bit clunky, it's open to hosting Megagames. It's open to publicizing them and so forth. And there's a ready-made audience of people who want to try something new and exciting. Seems to be a real gift in many ways. And there is UK Games Expo, but it's like a tenth the size of Gen Con and much more board game focused, I think.
Yeah, so while the UK Games Expo, I think it's 30,000 opposed to the 70,000 that Gen Con is. And there was a Mega Game run, not quite as small, but you know, it's still less than half the size. There was a Mega Game run there last year by John Misen into Southwest Mega Games, and he ran Watch the Skies, and that was a hit. I mean, we were thinking about taking Mega Games there again this year, but unfortunately, kind of things got in the way of that. But definitely, an idea I've been having is taking games along to a whole host of cons. And next year, EasterCon is going to be running, and I'm going to be doing a panel on Megagames there, which is a smaller convention. It's between 1,500 and 2,000 people, but I'll be going along to do a panel and basically go, right, these are Megagames. And getting Megagames out there is a tricky one, because the primary way is to get people to games. That can be hard. But at the same time, I'm aware that no one really has the time to go along to loads of different cons and loads of different areas to kind of go, here's a free Mega Game, here's a free Mega Game, here's a free Mega Game. So as I was riffing on earlier, trying to do those introducer games to people to get more people cycling through to get a taste of them is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the increase in diversity, I feel like, you know, we touched about it with Becky's games, but, you know, also like, you know, with Draft Night and Owl League, like those are the two first, you know, sports centric Mega Game and or like Mega Game adjacent designs that, you know, I've heard of anyways. So I think we'll get more and more broad, and that'll stabilize the player base a little bit more.
Yeah, I think one of the advantages we have in the UK is basically everybody knows each other, even if, like, you know, the guy who runs True North Mega Games, which is kind of based in Scotland and the northeast, that's 8-10 hours away from London, but we still see him every couple of months, basically. And I think that's easier for kind of growing the hobby. You can kind of accrete a couple of people at every new game, whereas I think someone who's based on the West Coast versus someone who's based in Minnesota, like, you're just never going to be able to meet, and you're never going to be able to bring mates along to your mate's game.
I've not been able to meet people in the same state as me. Hi guys.
It's really hi Stevenson. I'm only 8 hours above you. The real interesting thing about the North American scene is, while we're actively seeing the hobby grow, we are so disparate. Like even people 3 or 4 hours away, and there's so much to do in a lot of different places that people are not, unless they're really enthusiastic, they're not willing to drive, you know, any more than like 3 or 4 hours. They'll wait for one in their area, or they'll go do something else. And the other thing that's been interesting, at least for WCM, is when we first started in 2014, we at least were riding off of that Watch the Skies push. But as the years have gone by, progressively, we're competing with every board game con, big or small, every RPG con, big or small, and we're right by San Francisco. Like, the amount of things our players have to do that they might rather go do is huge, frankly.
I have a I'm sorry, my own point. Never mind.
Have you tried piggybacking off the these role-playing and board game cons?
They always
I've tried that.
want.
Yeah. They always want something.
They want you to conform. whatever their idea of the format is. So when you're talking to a con, you've got two, unless they've approached you, which we've had both, right? When you're talking to a con, there's two fundamental issues. A, the amount of land space we physically need, because from at least the way we run our mega game, the amount of land space we need for a 30-person game is not that much smaller than the amount of land space we need for an 80-person game. So unless we can guarantee that we're going to have 80 to 100 people, the land space is a huge issue. But it's our timing. It's the same thing that the players have some struggles with. When we're saying we're going to block off that area, and it's amazing GenCon lets us. When we say we're going to block out that area for 100 people to have an experience for 8 hours, and we need 2 hours before and 2 hours after, just from a con perspective, they look at that and they go, well, we could run 100 games for 4 people a table in that same space for whatever. So there's that logistical piece that's always a hang-up. Right. But the second hang-up is the organizer. Even if they've watched Shut Up and Sit Down, even if they know, unless they've directly been involved, there is no conception for what the hell we're offering. Absolutely none.
Yeah.
So there's and even when they've approached us, they're like, we're really into mega games. This is really cool. One of the biggest con what the fuck moments, excuse my language, that made me pull back from cons was when I was approached to do Sengoku by a con, and I was not aware of what con it was. It turned out it was a comic book / brony convention, if you are aware of what the brony was. And about halfway through the planning process, where they had offered us space, whatever, the organizer approached me and said, all right, the game's really awesome and I love it, but do you think you could reskin it to be My Little Pony themed? And I blinked, I've just been asked to redesign a historical fiction about 1550s Japanese politics into a war for pony supremacy. With all seriousness.
Which you did that, right? I mean, you definitely did that.
You have
to. Absolutely, I went for it.
I'm trying to imagine what Dave Boundy would react to that.
Oh God, yeah.
I'd pay to see that.
I think that would be the end of him.
John, I've never heard the story before. This is incredible.
It was a very depressing time period for me.
That's how I joined the West Coast Mega Games. Yes.
So I mean
Sorry, go on.
You have that uphill battle of explaining what the individual game calls for, explaining the player, how many hours are we going to run this thing, what's our logistical needs, and these are all issues we run into in GenCon. We've just we've enjoyed the support of GenCon to, at sometimes, a limited fashion.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, having literally. Oh, go on.
Sorry. No, I think that it gets at something which I think is very relevant with mega games, and it's a little bit of a dirty secret, but it's important, I think, to realize that like mega games are special and amazing and incredible experiences you can only have in mega games, but they're also horrendously inefficient.
Yes.
From a resources point of view, from a money point of view, from an effort point of view, they are incredibly inefficient pieces of entertainment. Possibly one of the most inefficient pieces of entertainment.
Yes, I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
Like, not even setting aside all the stuff you just mentioned, like, for a given game, the percentage of players you're looking at that are going to not enjoy themselves or not be engaged is significant.
Yeah.
And even for experienced players, right, like, I enjoy maybe 60% of games I go to, and the highs are really high, but the lows are low. Much lower than something like board games, where you sort of already know what you're signing up for. It doesn't take much effort to play.
I've made people cry.
Yeah. The emotions.
This is why I always control.
Same, yeah.
It's not the good kind of crying either. The my life has been destroyed cry.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
It's fascinating, yeah.
Wasn't my fault though. Wasn't my fault.
Yeah, I was just going to throw in back to the on the con topic, having just come from the first GenCon mega game this year. It was an uphill battle to let them to get them to let us send out a casting questionnaire pre-game. And I'm super glad we fought the battle and eventually got their permission. But yeah, it's such a different mindset. All of that pre-game engagement is just something cons don't really do, and yeah, they're just not set up for it anyway. You
Yeah,
really have to fight.
They fight us every year, and we push back every year, and every year they've given in. But they always say next year.
Oh,
next year they won't.
The other thing that's really different for me, at least in how I've run Mega Games and my experience of Mega Games, is both the pre-game engagement, the pre-game briefing, and the post-game briefing are what allows for not necessarily you won, she won, he won, but that the experience of the game and the interplay of all these different narratives and what people were doing from agency, that's what allows it. And when you're in a con environment, when you say the game's over, could you wait 4 minutes for us to get a debrief? You might lose 25 to 50% of the people, whereas in a mega game, like at the actual mega game event, those people are riveted. They're having their conversations. They're talking to each other. They're like, fight Control. Control can go figure out their thing, but we're going to have a conversation about what just went down right now. And from my perspective, Control's role in that environment, which isn't possible in a con, is to go, those were all your experiences. Let me show you the through line, because we saw a little bit more of it. Not to hijack it, but let's show you the through line. And in cons, you just do not have that.
I can absolutely, as my first game was Sengoku, my first mega game ever, the whole entire day was like, if I had just played the game and then left and then talked with my 4 other teammates, I might not have never came back. But it was the end conversation, sitting down and listening to everybody go around and talk about their experiences and realizing that I was like a really small part of this huge thing. That's what really sold me on it, was just the sheer like collectivism of it all.
Yeah, no, that part's fantastic.
It's interesting. I didn't go to it, but I read a bit about the Shucks mega game they ran, where players were playing different generations, and like they would come in, play for 2 hours as a generation of a single family, and then they would tag out and let another player come in who would play the next 2 hours as a separate generation of that family.
Intriguing.
And they would pass down like stories, ideas from players to players to players all the way down. And then, I mean, I don't know about whether players were given the overall narrative at the end. If I was a player in that game, I think that's quite
there was a big debrief at the very end.
Yeah, but it does also solve the problem of making it more viable for cons if you have a higher turnover of people. Or it solves one of the problems.
That's smart.
Yeah.
It's interesting because basically what's coming out of it for me here, and banging the drum a bit, is the objective of running games at cons fundamentally different than just running a normal mega game? And I think the answer is kind of coming up to that. Is it seems yes, you can't rely on the same thing. So do we need to be designing mega games for cons in a different way if we treat cons, if we treat cons basically as a way to go, here con goer, here's a mega game you've been to, and this is basically a vehicle to get them hooked to bring them into mega gaming in their local area.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, that's a conclusion that's already happened. Like Trenton's Deep Haven, My Sickle are all games that are designed to be easily transported. Well, maybe not Deep Haven, but and run at cons. And just the idea of like, I've designed shorter mega games, right? Which is a little bit of a heresy, right?
Right.
But they're just better. They're better at cons.
Yeah.
Kilo games.
I mean, one of the big things that happens at cons that doesn't really happen as often, people walk out because it's a convention and they have friends there, they have other things going on, maybe they didn't get much sleep. Like people will just bounce off of your games and they'll leave, and you kind of have to pick up the pieces. Like even if the game goes great for like I've been in many mega games where it's going really well. It's just there's going to be a certain amount of people leaving just because it's a convention.
More no-shows as well, I'd imagine.
Yes, totally.
Oh, a plague of no-shows.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Interestingly, that's been one feature. Well, we'll see tomorrow and Sunday. But today's convention mega game literally had zero no-shows. Although I'm sure the online format massively affects that because it's much less easy to sort of see other exciting things just at the edge of sight, as it were, and be tempted away.
Yeah, well, there kind of wasn't a GenCon going on this time around. Like there was the online stuff, but online, not compared to the real thing.
You can't look across the stadium and be like, oh, there's that thing over there I could be doing instead of this game.
It's a fatigue thing too. Like actual physical conventions are just exhausting.
Yeah, super true.
Yeah.
So what we're saying is y'all should come. All UK guys gotta come out.
Yes.
Well, I go every year because work pays, but unfortunately that means that I have to work. So I would love to play in the games, but I can't.
I think there was a plan for delegation actually. Like I was trying to drum up a couple of people to go, but it just got completely balked in March.
Yeah, it happened last year. I was quite jealous. I might even consider going one year, but it is just not cheap.
No.
I'd like to go again next year. This year wasn't going to be on the cards, unfortunately, even before it kind of shut down entirely. But yeah, next year I would definitely like to go back over.
That's how I feel about every UK game I hear about.
We had
over to the UK games.
So I absolutely would. I just don't have the resources to do that right now.
So interestingly enough, sorry to cut you off, Scott.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, you UK guys are actually the second craziest group of travelers that I've experienced at a convention.
Yeah.
Go on.
Because Trent knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
We had a crew of New Zealand folks fly out to Shucks last year and play in every single mega game that we ran.
Oh, cool!
Big group of them.
Yeah.
They're great.
Yeah.
What was the percentage of ticket sales that we got from just that group?
Oh, like 15%, I think.
Yeah, just from this one group the entire weekend.
Yeah, and then one of them, like, well, I won't get into it. They were awesome. They ended up having a good time, and it was very fun.
Well, you guys should come over and join a Mega Game Makers game about Byzantine succession.
The tough pitch.
I would love to. That sounds awesome.
Don't play the fun ones.
I'll play it, but only if you're ponies.
Oh God, my nightmares are now public.
So we're having the idea of that type of game absolutely fascinating, but then again, I like the idea of bringing in kind of adjacent hobbies, because that's what Shut Up and Sit Down did, right? They basically went and got a huge bunch of board gamers and adjacent hobbies into mega games, and it's still very possible that, and I'm not suggesting actually bronies, but it is possible basically that the next way for a big influx of people into the hobby is through really getting into something on kind of either the LARP scene or even these adjacent hobbies that exist, basically, that people, because as I kind of mentioned in the talk, Mega Games is the confluence of several points, and we've kind of accessed board games at a point in time quite well, though obviously that could use refreshing. We haven't done the same for LARPs, we haven't done the same for people who kind of like improv. So there's this whole range of adjacent hobbies that if we can somehow poke into them, there's a possibility for a bigger influx of numbers again.
Yeah, there are a lot of YouTubers with like 500,000 subscribers. You get one of them to a game, film a video in the same style as Shut Up Sit Down did. That would be a huge coup for the hobby.
I do.
So I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
Nope. I'll go apparently. I think that really comes down to designers. I think a lot of the games have room for that influx, but we as designers, whether we're doing casting or we're drawing from a group and doing team placement, have to be aware of what our sub games actually offer people. A council game does offer room for the LARPer or the role player. A strategic part of a game, if we design it right, offers meat for the board game player. But a lot of our strategic designs look like they offer meat, and then the board gamer gets into it and tries to get into the weeds, and it's too simple for them because we as designers have made sure that it's runnable. So when we're pulling these adjacent hobbies, we have to make sure that whatever subgame we think fits that niche or the game as a whole actually fits the niche. Because too often they come in and they go, "Oh, I'm really excited," and they find out, well, it's not enough meat, whether it's role playing
So
or
I
board
disagree
game
with
or
this
whatever.
actually. I would say so. I would say absolutely don't design sections of your mega game to be interesting as a standalone board game. I 100% hear what you're saying, but I think what mega games offer and what they are is they're an experience where you're making tactical decisions, but every decision you make is irrelevant without the buy-in of other players. And well, that's where they differ from board games.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's partly how you pitch them, but like for me, a mega game mechanic which someone can win, which is complex and nuanced enough as a board game mechanic that allows someone to win the game without doing negotiation, is a failed mega game mechanic. It might be a fantastic
must be
board game
avoided.
mechanic.
No, it must be avoided at all costs, but there still has to be enough for the individual player to do that if they come in from a tactical point of view, that they have to have a tactic to actually look at. And if you have the chaos of the mega game taking over that to the point that every decision actually has no agency, which I've seen many different times, then it can be a board game, right? That tactical player can't come in and play the board game and win. But it also can't be that they're going to the map and really all they're doing is reporting back, this is what happened and I could do nothing about it.
So not over by Christmas.
Okay, yeah, for sure. Okay, I agree with that. Yeah.
Not Over by Christmas does this quite well because there's a quite complicated map game, but there's a game above that of regional and upper commanders that have to be feeding resources down, essentially. So it's a multi-tiered game where there's a lot of detailed complexity at one end and a lot of high-level kind of thinking at another. Kind of going back to bringing adjacent hobbies in, I suppose what I've said, it's important to kind of remember there are differences within those hobbies. So you're trying to use them as feeders, knowing that not everyone from that hobby is going to like it, because there's a huge section of LARPers, and I'm a LARPer as well as a Megagamer, where what they're interested in is the set dressing. They go for the set dressing and turning up to a game and it looking like a medieval tent city for a couple of days. If you want to aim at that type of LARPer, then you'd have to have a huge amount of set dressing that basically mega games aren't really kind of set up to do. So just kind of have to be aware of what we're marketing to kind of in each genre if we had control over that, because there was no control over shut up and sit down, coming and do what they did. But if people intentionally seek it out, just need to be a little bit careful about the hobby that you're targeting, and people in that hobby are more or less likely to like.
I do. Sorry. But I do definitely agree with that part. Essentially, we actually branded one of our games as a little bit of like a bit of a LARP as well, to try to get people into it, because it had a good bunch of role playing in it. But what I found fascinating was that for my audience, as soon as I put the word LARP on there, sales immediately dropped.
That's fascinating.
I know. I legitimately thought that adding the word LARP would actually bring people in. But it really depends on like the specific microcosm. I have no doubt that there is a LARP scene in this city. It's just that they're not my scene, apparently.
They're doing their own LARPs. You're counter programming.
Yeah, no, I am one very, very small games company, and I am not going to be able to go up against some of the institutions of LARPing there are around here. Uh, One thing I was saying though, in terms of like bringing other ideas and genres in here, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of this before. Almost certainly, yes, because this is Gen Con. Um, but there are these things called blockbuster LARPs, or like destination LARPs. The idea being is that like you pay a very large ticket price and you get room and board along with it. And the idea is that you get enough people in there that gives enough of a budget to have a very impressive set dressing and all that stuff along with it. And the very useful idea, maybe some ideas could be taken from that and added into mega games.
Yeah. They're kind of called
like
Fest LARPs in the UK. I go to one called Empire and a bunch at Run. Although it's not quite what you're talking about, but yeah, you go and there's a huge amount of effort put into set dressing. It depends basically on what you want to design, because we tried floating the idea of Megagame Con a couple of years ago in the UK and building on various parts of that, and there wasn't much take up for it. So the thing is, what I'm basically saying is I'm not sure, but go for it and just do it and see if it's a case of if you build it, they will come.
It's on the docket for us. We very nearly put enough people together in order to create like an escape room festival. But as far as a Megagame conference, that could be a pretty cool thing if you could find the venue and have people be okay with ticket prices that are substantially more expensive than Megagame gamers are used to.
Yeah, that's a whole other problem right there.
Yeah.
The level at which tickets are priced, the fact the expectation, at least in the UK, is that they're £30 or about $40 would be in the very top range. I think that has stifled a lot of opportunities to add set dressing that might appeal to LARPers, or properly incentivize designers to make the new exciting genre-bending games we're talking about. Because there's just no money there.
Yeah, because
you group us all together is that if you group us, we have such long experiences right now that a convention, you've got what, 3 mega games played over the course, 5 mega games played over the course, unless we start counter programming ourselves. And internationally, we're still not a big enough community to draw enough people to play 3 games simultaneously, or what have you.
I think we are, but
it would definitely be a very special kind of event. I don't think it's to be the sort of thing where it's like everyone would drive and fly all over the world to show up at this one summit. It'd be more like a thing where it's like 3 mega games all in the same weekend.
It's a difficult thing because, as I kind of said, I genuinely do think there are probably under 3,000 mega gamers worldwide, and the con I'm speaking at next year, EasterCon, is a con that's been going since the 50s, and it's in the UK. It's more about how kind of games are designed, more about how you make the sausage, and that only goes from 1 to 2,000 people. So as soon as you start getting down into niche things, the numbers really, really drop essentially. It's a difficult thing. Basically, there was a thought there. It's kind of got away from me. My apologies.
What's the largest game that you guys have managed in the States? I realise it's not a sort of contiguous amount of groups, but still.
That's a good question. I know that I ran a collaborative escape room with 300 kids. But that was but I wouldn't say that that's a mega game. That's really more of like a massive escape room.
Our biggest watch list guys for WCM, and like I said, I tend to ride on the big side compared to a lot of other groups, was 85 players and 20 controllers.
Yeah,
that's probably one of the highest.
Yeah, my biggest is 70.
But I also have the
size of games is.
I'd say 30 to 40.
Yeah, I mean, I think conventions are much higher than that, but probably over like average wise, yeah.
My average is around 50.
So when we were talking to people in 2018 outside of the convention Watch the Skies, which Peter, are you still here? Our convention numbers are up to 50, 60s on average?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I encourage, if people have a 40-person design, I encourage them to increase it.
To go 6, yeah. But in 2018, which was our most active year, when I was like, what are people running? I would regularly be like, oh, this is a 52, this is a 60, and I'm going, oops, I'm running, 60 minimum, 110 maximum. But I also had the luxury of not being designed off of Watch the Skies 1. Our Watch the Skies was designed while Jim was running Watch the Skies 3. So he actually gave us Watch the Skies 3 entire development history. And I had to cobble together our Watch the Skies out of that non-game package.
Hi, friend. How are you doing?
So you say luxury, but that's not the word I'd have used.
Yeah, God. I remember buying Jim's game. I'm sure that Jim is a fantastic person, and I'm really glad that exists, because it was like I could be like, oh, I can just buy a mega game. Okay, I shall buy the mega game. Oh, hey, let's open it up. Oh no.
I say luxury because as a self-proclaimed redesigner, I don't want the package. The package has been distilled for me. The package is missing a lot of the designer's notes. The package is missing a lot of those assets, which is the number one complaint about us packaging, right? And having seen Watch the Skies 1 and seen Watch the Skies Light, I would not have been able to achieve what I was able to achieve with either of those packages. The fact that Jim was willing to give me Watch the Skies 3, which I have no idea what it was like for a player perspective, but he never finished Watch the Skies 2. So Watch the Skies 3 was an amalgamation of things from Watch the Skies 2, things from Watch the Skies 3, and additional notes he didn't deploy. With 5 different maps, because he had a different map for each thing, with 18 different playable aliens, with 30 national teams built.
Oh, Christ.
So we never ran all of that, but as a redesigner, I had Jim's entire thought philosophy through 3, which he self-professed as he sold to me that he would never ever run a mega game like that ever again. So to me, having all of that as a redesigner allowed me a lot of breadth in what I could do within his design philosophy at the time. But it was also a ton of material to go out. And every design I've worked with since, I have to synthesize without corrupting the original design, all of that. And I think that has been much harder from my point of view, and the fact that I'm still working with it. Because if somebody else wanted to scale up Watch the Skies 1, they would have to try and figure out and or recreate every single team that they wanted to add to it without destroying the original design.
Coincidentally, that's exactly what I had to do. There's not a single line from that original thing that I got from Jim Wallman that wound up in my version. I wound up calling it something different. I called it Earth Descendant because it was so different.
Well, yeah, and we would do a disservice to call it Watch the Skies if it goes too far, because then we're taking his name and his brand and putting our own thing on it.
He's now jettisoned basically all of the design for his most up to the minute Watch the Skies. It's a very, very different experience now. And he's redesigning it again for the
digital
audience. And the map is extremely abstract now. It is really vague indeed. And I think I can see where he's going with it, but I think it will surprise people who kind of play it.
Yeah, it amazed me how like science. I was surprised that science had nothing in it, really.
Which version did you pull?
The very first.
Watch. I mean, it was a token game. It was a token and argument game at that point.
True. I may or may not have just turned it into a version of Sidereal Confluence.
So, I mean, Science is one of the games he's changed the most over the course of the iterations.
Yeah, I think I left
I
UN.
think that's like fair and almost inevitable. Like I think Watch the Skies, the very first iteration, was designed in a very different space against an expectation that 100% of the players, or 95% of the players, had played not just one mega game before, but many. It was in a totally different setting in that sense. And in that setting, I think it really works. But yeah, throwing a new player into the game and giving them what you described quite aptly as a token and argument game.
Yeah.
Homework, basically.
and greatly amusing homework.
There's a bit of a design philosophy that things like that were just to generate outputs for people to argue about, really. Even in operational games, sometimes the battle stuff was really just something to give the politicians tokens to argue over, which isn't a philosophy I particularly like, but
A shout out to Pickles here, who's designed one of my favourite mega games ever in Copper Cockroaches and
Really?
Cows. Yes, it's one of my favourites. Turning myself into a big bank balance.
Cool.
Which Pickles should definitely give people a couple of lines about.
Yeah.
If you want to,
go for it.
I am, as you're aware, not a keen self-publicist, but it was meant to be historical, classic old school Mega Game Maker's historical simulation of the Mexican Revolution in 1913, which I ran in about 2004 using cumbersome, complex mechanisms, and I tried to update it a bit. So it's the classic interaction of politics and military action, and a lot of economics and railways are involved as well. So I think Peter actually asked me for the rules, but he hasn't got back to me about how to send them to him. So
yeah, well worth running it.
Sorry, say again.
I was just butting in to say, well worth getting hold of those rules. It's one of those themes that on the surface of it, you look at and go, this is a bit obscure and historical, but the game itself just comes alive so well. And the mechanics are super streamlined and clever.
Well, good. Thank you.
I'm remembering the group that came as a stag do. I remember the group that came to the game when it ran in London for a stag do, and was the groom playing Panchavia. Have I got that right?
I was playing Panchavia, yeah. That's
yeah,
right.
I had a great time.
So,
it's one of those groups that rocks up in the sombrero, and you're just like, this is going to be a fun game.
Yeah, I was really nervous about the fact that they were stag do because I'd never come across them before, so I thought they might be like teenagers who were out to just get drunk and ruin the game, but they're actually really into it. It was very rewarding, that part of it. But,
to run. Sorry. Cool. I actually got one. I actually got commissioned to run one of these games at a wedding.
Oh, cool.
No way.
Oh God, I cannot imagine the kind of stress you'd have been under doing that.
So the good news is that the bride, who was the main person spearheading all this, had two big things running for me. First, she had rented like an actual giant haunted mansion to play it in.
Wow.
Okay.
And the second was that she was a fan of my work.
Okay, that makes it easier.
It makes it substantially easier, and she knew what I was going to get up to.
Yeah, and it's the fact the bride spearheaded the thing is a big stress reliever.
It went,
I guess.
It went absolutely fantastically. We had one. I think like one of the best man's was his character. It was 1920s sort of theme. It's sort of like a murder mystery, except you've got factions that are trying to hide the killer.
Nice.
And other factions that are like trying their own subplots, and there are rituals and magical things and all sorts of stuff happening. And and what happened was that like one of the characters, their job was to be a cocaine salesman. Because 1920s. cocaine is wonderful for fixing your hair, for putting it in the kids. And the idea was that he would go around and get as many signatures as possible. And then we had another character who was actually the bride's sister, who was a cocaine abolitionist. And the police at the end of the night, anybody who signed both both papers would get arrested. So they were trying to collect signatures for both abolishing and signing up for monthly deliveries of cocaine, among other
Amazing.
things.
Was any actual cocaine involved?
lots of crushed Altoids.
What are we doing in a pinch?
But what was glorious about a lot of these things was that a lot of these you just gave people their roles in like an envelope, and almost all, like half of them immediately open it up and immediately drop into character. We gave the person who's supposed to sell the cocaine the bottle of cocaine, and immediately he turns around and goes, "You, sir, I have an amazing product for you."
Yeah, that's great. I feel like
go ahead.
Yeah. No, with the wedding thing, the more I think about it, I guess there is kind of everyone that's gone to that event is invested in something, right? They're all there together to celebrate a thing, and that's a really great launch pad for a game, I suppose.
Yeah, I definitely think that you need to give them different these games different contexts. That way, you can get people into it. It helps with that.
Yeah, for sure. And like it goes back to the earlier thing we were talking about, which was that trying to optimize games to attract specific audiences like lovers or whatever. And I think a big part of how one should go about doing that is the theme that you pick, right? If you pick the Battlestar Galactica or the Watch the Skies kind of movie-esque themes, then you need to arrange your game in an entirely different way to appeal to a very different audience. Whereas if you're recreating the Mexican Revolution, then that's a different audience as well.
The theme matters so much to hook people in there. Although what I found fascinating is I recently did a poll for a bunch of different ideas that we were trying to go through, and I noticed correlation, and that is that the shorter the game was, the more people wanted to do it. Most people wanted to do like 3 hours, which I thought was interesting. People, I have a small
Who are
contingent.
you polling here? Is this people who've been to Megagames? People who are just general public?
They are my previous Megagame players who have played Watch the Skies and others.
Okay, and even within that population, because I'd expect the general public certainly, but I'm interested that even sort of people who've been to and presumably enjoyed Megagames would still say actually you'd be more likely to get me for a 3-hour game. But I guess that's some quite significant data there.
I mean, believe me, if you were to talk to the general public, they would say 1 hour, please. To which I would say that is not a mega game. That is a game.
Yeah.
But I know I have had people who definitely are into the idea of like, ooh, 12 hours. Can I bring my pajamas? And we can go even longer. But they're definitely in a very small minority, like 15%.
For sure, yeah.
But it seems like the real issue is that mega games, when you're in them, 6 hours does not feel like 6 hours. It goes by really bloody fast. But when you are on the outside thinking about buying tickets to it, then you have to worry about lunch and you have to worry about dinner. You have to worry about food in general, which has been a big bugbear with my events.
You just play on through lunch, to be honest. If you haven't brought any, you're completely out of luck.
That is definitely what we thought.
So, I mean, while I will try when I can to schedule a mega game in a venue which has, you know, a small supermarket or something equivalent nearby, I also know that the number of times I've gotten to the end of a mega game and gone, I haven't eaten, is like 2/3 of the mega games I've been to.
Yeah, we've gone the direction of not doing the lunch, but it was definitely a question that we had to ask for our participants. And I've been extremely lucky to have Leslie Loy as my logistics side, because she's always concerned about participants. So she will always either generate a list of local places, but stopping for lunch has been a major question. And the conclusion we have had is basically the same as you down in San Diego, that people who are not familiar with mega games look at that time period, they go 8 hours of fucking gaming. Whew, you know, no way, no how. And they have to be pulled into the hobby by somebody who is proselytizing for that, because that is a direct challenge to it. But our other experience is if you provide a break, the game doesn't stop, the mechanics stop.
This was a big conversation in the UK as well, this exact point.
If you provide them that space where the tension, so to me the main elements of a mega game are scarcity and time pressure. Whatever the theme, whatever the thing. So if you provide them that break, the game you left at the beginning of lunch is not the game you come back to. It is a fundamentally different game. They are rested, they are making better or worse decisions, and you will go forward with a completely different narrative that shifted over that half hour out. So we've cut them, and now we just make sure that our participants have the ability to get, or we're ordering, or we're door dashing, or so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've settled on, and I'm probably going to be doing in future games that I run, is just 1 or 2 slightly extended team times, quite clearly signaled to be like, we're not going to stop the game per se, but this team time you got 20 minutes instead of the normal 8. If you need to go buy a sandwich, now's the time. And that, in the one game I trialed it, seemed to be a fairly good compromise.
Yeah, when we ran our Watch the Skies equivalent, we said, "All right, everybody, we're going to stop for lunch," and then everyone went quiet, and okay, and then immediately the room burst back into negotiation because people negotiated all the way through lunch.
Yeah, I really want to try a game. I don't know if it's been done before, but I haven't seen it. I really want to try a game where a lunch break is included as within the theme. So, you know, perhaps a great feast where all the different members of ruling parties are coming together, or something like that, or a diplomatic summit. I think that would be absolutely fascinating.
Jim did that in Crisis in Britannia, only it kind of was a bit weird because it didn't apply to the Romans, and it was a kind of almost a big quandary in the game. Will the Romans ignore this sort of sacred feast? And if so, they'll probably lose their native supporters, but they might gain some tactical advantages, etc. So it doesn't quite hit what you're describing, but it still was very interesting.
Yeah.
How'd it go?
Yeah.
The one I was at, I was one of the Romans, and I pushed very hard for it, and we ended up observing the sacred feast as well, and almost made enough diplomatic progress that when certain Mr. McDaniel then went rogue, we didn't completely lose all our ground again.
Oh man, that was my first game. It was Oxford, right, Ed?
Yeah, was that your first ever mega game?
That was my first ever mega game.
Oh my god!
Yeah, I'm newbie.
You know what's would actually be pretty interesting.
So I've actually. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no, go ahead, Kevin.
I've actually kind of liked the idea of that shift change over lunch, giving a players a chance to step back and actually solidify some plans moving forward. It also kind of gives control a chance to get together and say, okay, what's actually happening here? Where do we want to go from here?
Yeah.
Yeah, what I think might be a a clever idea to play with as well. Also, is what if food was a mechanic? Because in my games, food is always a mechanic. Usually, the food being like, "Hey, we're France. We brought some baguettes. If you give us this concession, we'll give you this bread."
I mean, the players bring that in, but I would severely warn against actually mechanicalizing it. They bring it in. Let it be on the players.
No,
It was done a bit more elegantly in again Crisis in Britannia, because the Celtic tribes had certain rituals associated with food, and the food, if I remember, was essentially bags of Quality Street. I think they were provided by the game, but like whether you would accept the chocolate from when it was gifted to you, and how you accepted it had diplomatic implications. Which, as blundering Roman generals, Ed and I stumbled into the nuances of that very quickly. Because, of course, we weren't briefed to know what those nuances were.
No.
And we ended up being very offensive, apparently. But yeah, that was great.
I think
any lunch break.
To take offense, right?
Yeah, no, that was great. And like, so any lunch break, because a lunch break is going to change like the flow of the game. If it's themed in such a way as that makes sense, like a diplomatic summit or something like that, or maybe if your Game of Thrones is like a big wedding where all the characters come together, anything where it makes sense for the course of the game to change is a great idea for like theming a lunch break around.
Yeah. On this subject, actually, I was running another game, and I was concerned because I had to raise the prices of the tickets going in, and so I figured that I need to add something as a value add, and so I had an open bar that people could have gone through. And what was fascinating to me was over the course of the entire game, no one touched the bar.
Amateurs.
Try that in the UK.
Yeah, 100%. Like you would be in trouble if you tried that in the UK. I tell you.
They literally because what happened was I think my hypothesis was that everyone was like, we have no time. Why would people just kept going to the bar, getting a giant bottle of water and walking away?
What was the theme of the game?
It was Watch the Skies.
Okay, yeah. The game, I mean, Jim ran a pirate game.
Yeah, wow.
You can immediately see where I'm going with this.
There was a game. Sorry,
I'm pretty sure there was a no alcohol on the premises policy, let alone an open bar, and that still did not stop some of the more enterprising individuals from partaking.
There was a Russian Revolution game where the white Russians were downing vodka every team time.
Disappointingly, nobody drank a White Russian.
No. I took to the game a couple I was playing France. I did take a bunch of cheese baguettes and a couple of bottles of red wine, and both of those bottles were gone by the end of the day. Yeah. Alcohol in British games is reasonably common.
In our Sengoku, both vodka and sake came to the game to be offered in tea ceremonies. The problem being is our age range was from 70 to 14. And one of the Bakfu was a 14-year-old, and he ended up with a full bottle of sake that I had to confiscate. So that was an interesting thing. But yeah, for me, those food offerings are a fundamental part of Megagames, but they need to be an open-ended, player-driven thing. If you try to mechanicalize them too much, it puts pressure on people to deal with that. And I think that's just a normal part of deal making that Megagames really allows players to get into. Like the deal part of a Megagame doesn't have to be so codified as long as it can be tracked in some way to affect the narrative.
Yeah.
And sort of counterpoint to that as well, if you have any mechanic in the mega game which involves potentially withholding food as part of a deal making process, then you've got a massive accessibility issue for players with diabetes and similar conditions.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I wasn't really referring to like mechanicalizing, like people bringing in stuff. More like hey, so I have an ability which says that control will give me a sweetie if you do this. So I'm not saying that I'm going to cause chaos just because I want like a bunch of Snickers, but like I might.
That's certainly interesting design space for sure.
Most of my designs may or may not involve just causing as much chaos as possible.
Nice.
All right.
Yeah,
At this stage, I'm afraid I'm going to have to bow out, but it's been fun chatting to everyone.
Indeed.
Oh god,
Cheers.
it's 1:15.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. I guess for you guys,
Is this
you guys
fun?
would be. Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say it's probably more reasonable for you guys.
Thanks for the talk.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys.
Yeah, thank you
No,
so
it's
much.
been a pleasure.
Right. Right.
Pickles.
Bye, everyone.
Pickles, before you disappear.
And so yeah, for if anyone's still watching, Scone, where does Megagame start and board game start? I'm not quite sure on the wording of that, but your board games fundamentally kind of fewer people. I guess with Megagames, it's when you're adding in those rules that don't require going to the map to do things, where you've got that element that exists away from just the mechanics, where you've got purely negotiation roles. Would be a starter for me. Hopefully that answers the question. If you're still around, it is quite late now. But yeah, thank you very much.